Year. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Not Another Formula One podcast. And if I sound tired, it's because I am tired. Because that race was a snoozer. Jumping right into qualifying. You'd think, qualifying typically is the most exciting part of Monaco, Monaco's all about Saturday because when you qualify, it's usually where you're going to finish because there's not a lot of strategy to play in Monaco. But this race was different, or at least in theory, because the FIA made a mandatory 2 pit stop rule for this race. And without spoiling too much, it didn't work. In fact, it probably just made things worse. But anywho, qualifying, both Mercedes go out in Q2. Not unsurprising. That's just a continuation of their poor form ever since last week in Imola. Not a great last 2 weeks from Mercedes. I can't remember why Kimi Antonelli got knocked out, but George Russell's engine choked up in the tunnel, and they were really pushing that motherfucker. That was hilarious. Speaking of pushing, both the V-carbs got into Q3. God forbid they put in this kind of performance at any other circuit that isn't Monaco. But congratulations to both Isaac Hadjar and Liam Lawson for their best ever qualifying starts. Lewis Hamilton, who in theory qualified 4th, was given a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Max Verstappen up near the casino corner. I don't remember the exact corner name, nor do I care. Max Verstappen, who I said last week would have a god lap of sorts and managed to put himself on pole in Monaco. That did not happen. He starts 4th only because Lewis Hamilton received a 3-place grid penalty. So Lando Norris takes pole by the skin of his teeth, maybe about a 10th of a second ahead of Charles Leclerc, and then Piastri, and then Lewis, 3-place penalty. So Verstappen, Hadjar, Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, Esteban Ocon, Liam Lawson, and Alex Albon. The race starts, and boy, did it almost end just as quickly as it started, dude. Lando locked up all 4 tires. I haven't seen a cloud of smoke that big on a racetrack since the Romain Grosjean crash. Speaking of crashes, Gabby Bortoleto goes for the most ridiculous move alongside Kimi Antonelli and puts himself in the wall. 2 rookies. They're going to duke it out, of course. It's Monaco. Why not? But yeah, no, seriously, Gabby Bortoleto, you really hurt yourself there. I mean, thankfully he was able to put it in reverse and get it out of the wall. But that does bring out the virtual safety car, which led to a lot of pit stops. The first of the 2 mandatory pit stops that all these drivers had to complete. And this kind of set course for what we'd see for the entire rest of the race, because this was a boring-ass race. This was a race of every driver pretty much in the back half of the top 10 driving to the minimum speed they can without causing a yellow flag, all in order for their teammates in the front half to get a free pit stop with the gap. Liam Lawson was somewhat sacrificed to hold Isaac Hadjar up in 6th place. The Williams boys did their part in securing their places in the top 10, much to the annoyance of George Russell taking it upon himself to cut the chicane down by the harbor, the one after the tunnel that everyone seems to either cut or hit the wall at, and then just proceeds to say, fuck it, give me the penalty. Which, fair to him, it's Monaco. I mean, gaps can build, and, he thought he was going to get, a couple second penalty. Nah, they gave his ass a stop and go in the pits. Which, considering he had to make 2 pit stops anyways, which he hadn't made. In fact, I don't think either of the Mercedes boys made a pit stop until the end. Or at least George Russell did. I don't remember, but it doesn't matter, because they had a terrible race. George Russell wasn't happy. Toto Wolff wasn't happy. He loves to pick a fight with his other fellow team principals, but who'd have thought that we'd ever see a fight between Toto Wolff and James Vowles? The sensei and the master. I wouldn't really call Toto the master. I don't think he knows shit. He's just a guy with a lot of money. So this race, it drags on very, very, very boringly. Everyone makes their second, or mostly everyone makes their second pit stop, except for Max. Max, who, Red Bull, very smart with their strategies, and in theory, this should have been a good strategy, just leaving him out and hoping for a safety car, even though despite there being, maybe 20 laps left after the last safety car. I forget why there was a second safety car. I can't remember. It wasn't because of Fernando Alonso. Fernando Alonso, he just parked up out of nowhere. I must have not have been paying attention to that part of the race, but I swear I looked away for 5 seconds, and the next thing you know, Fernando Alonso was disqualified. I'm not disqualified. Did not finish. DNF'd. But Max stays out, praying for a safety car of some sorts, while Lando, Charles, and Oscar are all chasing up behind. Lando gets kind of close to Max, I think within about 2 seconds or so, but has to hold back because, of course, we know that McLaren can't do shit in dirty air, or can't hold itself in dirty air. Those tires had to make it to the end, and I think Lando knew that, so he backed off. Just enough to still hold off Charles, who he was kind of banking on Oscar catching up, but that was never going to happen. I don't really know if Oscar would have had the pace had Charles. Charles probably should have been Charles' race. I know I talked a lot of shit last week saying that he wouldn't top his Monaco curse breaking. But I'd say he probably should have won this race. But, even he admits that his race was lost on Saturday. It's funny how actually they really thought that making this mandatory 2 pit stop rule would change the order. Because, the top 3 hasn't changed in finishing in almost ever, but maybe once or twice ever. And what did it do? It didn't change a single bit, not even the top 4. Anyways, Max is still out waiting on this safety car. Finally, it gets to the end of the race and they realize, there's no chance of a safety car now, so they just bring him in to avoid disqualification. And Lando brings it home. Congratulations, Lando. Stealing a little bit of the Jensen Button Monaco baby. Whatever Chan after the race, little post-race radio. Charles Leclerc very disappointed as well. You could just see it on his face. He knew that was his race to win or his race to lose. I don't know. I said last week that Charles Leclerc Monaco curse would continue, and in a way I think I'm right. He didn't crash. He actually finished, which is crazy because him winning Monaco last year for the first time was the first time he's finished a race at Monaco in any category, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what they said on the Sky Sports broadcast. But yes, he did not win, thus the curse. I guess it's still there. I also said that the mandatory two-stop and potential rain, there was no rain, would cause safety cars that could shake up the top 10. In a way it did. All it did was create a strategy where everyone drove 5 to 6 seconds slower than they should have per lap and created pitiable gaps for their teammates. I mean, yeah, that shook up the top 10 enough to put both the Williams and both the V-Carbs in the top 10, along with the Haas. Shout out Esteban Ocon, somehow bringing that car home in 7th. We know he loves a bit of Monaco. Didn't he get the podium? That was probably 2023? I don't remember. And third, I said my third prediction was that Max will win because of all the strategy. Well, he was close. He led the back half of the race for most of it. But it was never really his race to win unless he got the safety car. But you know damn well, if there had been a red flag or any kind of safety car that could have gotten Max a free pit stop and put him out ahead of Lando, Lando just would have been pissing and moaning, talking about, less, what was that? Just calling it lucky, which granted, yeah, it probably would have been lucky, but it also would have been great strategy, waiting to make that second pit stop until there was a safety car. But it didn't work out, so there's none of that. Max has to accept 4th place. So without further ado, your top 10 finishers of the 2025 Monaco Grand Prix are Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Isaac Hadjar with a career-high finish of 6th place, Esteban Ocon in 7th, Liam Lawson, another career-high finish for himself, in 8th, Alex Albon, and 10th, Carlos Sainz. The 2025 Spanish Grand Prix is next week at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, or however it's pronounced. I don't really care. All these drivers should know this circuit like the back of their hand, as this was the training or testing circuit for many years up until, after COVID. So we're going to see where these cars really stack up. I mean, besides Bahrain, this is probably the most balanced track of all the tracks. It's certainly had some better races since they changed that final chicane. I'm excited to see how this race goes. And without further ado, here's my 3 predictions for the race. Firstly, I am going to say that Carlos Sainz will finally get his shit together with the Williams car and put together a top 5 finish at home in Spain. Wouldn't that just be great for him? A little home, a great finish for his crowd. My second prediction, along the same lines, is that Fernando Alonso will finally break whatever this unlucky spell he's seemed to have this season, and he'll get at least a point. And my third prediction is that the flexi wing regulation change will fuck with McLaren. And McLaren, we're going to see a bit of a different order out here. I'm not sure if they'll... definitely, they still have definitely the best car. No doubt about that. But I'm saying it's probably going to be a little harder for them to secure the top 2, top 3 grid slots. We'll see. This championship is kind of blown open right now, with Lando having a great weekend in Monaco. I believe the gap to Oscar is only 3 points, which I'm not sure what that means for Max Verstappen, but, he's definitely within 20 points of the McLaren boys. I think after this triple header, this first third of the season, we're going to see who's really going to step up and carry this championship. It could be the McLarens. It could be Max. This, like I said in my predictions, this flexi wing thing could change everything. I'm not really, I can't say I'm not banking on it, but I said in my predictions, I said it would make a big difference. But apparently, Andrea Stella, the McLaren team principal, said that they're not too worried about it because they've already been driving without the flexi wing. I don't really believe that, though. But once again, thank you for listening to this episode of Not Another Formula One podcast. I'm sorry it's short and potentially boring, but then again, so was this race weekend. And hopefully it gets better once we go to Spain and Canada. You think? I think so. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that bell notification so you can get the next one. Goodbye, everybody.